here we go with another Sunday lunch, and before we get started, we haven't been taken hostage by John Campbell. We are just showing off the new Monarchs masks that Liam and I have been sent.
They're not bad at all, are they, John?
No, they're very good.
Comfortable.
Yes. But most of these should be out in the post to everyone. I think we should probably take them off so people can understand what we're saying. We're saying that they'll be in the post to everyone, and hopefully you should all have them by the end of next week. That's the promo stuff done, and what a guest we've got for you this week. Liam?
John, I'm just wearing mine like all the riders seem to wear them in Poland. They don't seem to cover their nose with them. That's what they do. Yeah, we've got a great show lined up for you this morning, and as always, I will be monitoring Facebook, as will John, waiting for your questions for Mike Hunter. And I've got to tell you that already we've had more questions for Mike pre-show than we have had for any of the riders.
Yeah, I don't know why we've got this guy on. I don't entirely know how much he knows about Speedway, but listen, we'll give it a crack and see what he can do. But no, Mike, you know more about Speedway than probably everyone who goes to Armadale on a Friday night putting together. It's great to have you along. Thanks for joining us.
It's a great pleasure. I've certainly been around the sport long enough since I was 13, and I'm a lot more than 13 now. So if I haven't learned something, there would be something wrong.
We always ask everyone, that obviously it's a wee bit weird just now, we're not getting to Armadale every Friday night. How have you been surviving the lockdown, and what's been keeping you busy?
Well, although I know it's been a bad thing for a lot of people with health problems and employment problems, lockdown is not bad for me at all. I can still watch things on streaming services, I can still listen to things, and my primary hobby nowadays is trying to build up the Monarchs archive of statistics, photos, DVDs, programs, etc., and get it properly organised, which it never really has been. And I go for a walk in the garden and all that sort of stuff.
Mike, we know that you have an amazing archive. How many years has it taken you to put together what you have? Because I mean, you have everything going right back to the beginnings of Meadowbank now, don't you?
Yes, I've got nearly every programme. There's quite a few other people who have that kind of archive as well. I've got absolutely monstrous numbers of photographs, probably into six figures, I suspect. Not as many as John Somerville, who collects for the whole sport, but I've got a massive, massive collection of Monarchs photos. DVDs, thousands of the damn things. Justified maybe a wee bit recently because we've been able to show a lot of them on the EMTV, and I do like also, if riders ask for copies of meetings they've been in, I like to be able to help them out with those. So that justifies why upstairs is packed with folders of DVDs.
Well, it's an amazing collection and archive, which probably brings us to the first question, which comes from Lorraine. And Lorraine wants to know, how did you actually start following Speedway?
Well, at school I had a couple of friends who were keen on Speedway. One guy in my class, Ian Kidd, used to show me the programmes, and I was intrigued with how Dick Campbell always got 3 points. What was special about this guy? And another friend that I've had for many years, Alistair Miller, him and his family eventually persuaded me to go along in 1961. They tried to persuade me in 1960, but I argued with them and persuaded them to go on a picnic instead. So I missed a year of Speedway through that, winning that argument. But from the first night I went in 1961, I was completely blown away by Speedway, and it became my main interest ever since, I suppose.
It's one of those, it's one of those things, I think, when people, especially kind of nowadays, if I bring friends along or anything like that, you know, it's a sport where they find it difficult, or they would maybe never go. But when you actually take them there, like you just said, they're kind of blown away by what it is and how these guys do it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It is hard to get people to go, especially perhaps at Armadale, which is so far away from Edinburgh, and it's not a palatial stadium by any means. But once you get them there, they're surprised that they didn't know about this before.
What was that first match, Mike, that you saw?
Oh, that was Monarchs versus Rayleigh on the 10th of June 1961. And it's quite a famous match. It's in a book of classic Speedway matches. It was a 4-2 in the last race to the Monarchs to win by 40 points to 38. Dougie Templeton and George Hunter against Reg Reeves and Stan Stevens of the Rayleigh Rockets. It was a sensational match to have as your first match, and it maybe explains why I've been so keen ever since.
Well, they used to say happiness is a 40-38, didn't they? That was the saying back then.
That was it, so I got that right away.
This is embarrassing. I'm 39 years old. I have no idea. I couldn't tell you the first Speedway meeting I went to. I need to really sit down. Like, where was it? But it's incredible. So you got that first kind of taste for it, Mike, and then so where did that take you from then? Where did your involvement in it become from then?
Well, I was only a fan during the Meadowbank and Coatbridge years. I didn't have any direct involvement with any of the riders or the promotion. Actually, I was still at school and then university. And it was during the 1970s that I really started to travel a lot. And of course, there was no Monarchs at that time. But, and I really enjoyed British Speedway in the 70s. I thought it was a fantastic product then. But then we got the news that there was a possibility of the Monarchs coming back to Meadowbank. We had a campaign which we were asked to conduct by the GRA to persuade the locals and the councillors that it was a good idea. And I remember speaking at the council meeting, and we were eventually very successful in bringing Speedway to Powder Hall, but it didn't look as though it was going to be successful for quite a time. There was some opposition to it. Thankfully it was. And from then, I did a page in the programme in 1977 and then was asked to take over the programme. I think Mike Parker thought it was a good idea because it would stop me writing the Supporters magazine, which was perhaps a bit more critical than the official programme. So he asked me to do it in 78, and I've been the, if you like, the programme editor or whatever you call me, ever since 1978. It's a long time.
So that was a tactical move on Mike Parker's part.
Yeah.
Let me take you back to
closer. Get your enemies closer.
Let me just take you back to Meadowbank, Mike. Can you, for those of us who never experienced the Meadowbank experience, can you just paint a picture of what it was like arriving at Meadowbank, what the crowds were like, what the atmosphere was like, and what the stadium itself was like?
Right, there's my phone going, but that's been shut off. Yeah, Meadowbank was, it had a big car park at the front, and it was a pretty old-fashioned stadium, but in those days, most stadiums were kind of like that. The inevitable corrugated iron that you still get at Armadale. The terracing was mostly lacking in any sensible place to stand. It was just a slope of ash. The council eventually put in a little bit of terracing, but not much. The stand was an old wooden thing that had come from a football ground. But the track was really a superb track. It was a bank track with not particularly short straights, not particularly long straights rather, which led to very good racing. And Hoskins was the absolute master of putting on a real show, which was mainly Speedway, but his novelty items as well, people diving into tiny pools off the top of stands and rock groups and impersonation contests, all sorts of stupid nonsense. But he was such a good showman at putting these things across that it made every night at Meadowbank a great entertainment.
Did you, when you were young in that Meadowbank, did you ever have, Peter Colvin asks, did you ever have any aspirations yourself to become a Speedway rider?
Not really, no, it's too dangerous. I'm too sensible. We did used to have, we lived next to an old tennis court which we could ride our bicycles round and pretend to be Speedway riders. That was as far as it ever really got. I've never ridden a Speedway bike. There was one time that Dave Trounson and a young lad called Rab Thompson took me to the beach with the intention of making me ride round the beach. And to be fair, when I've commented on them so much, I should know more about what it's like. But I'm glad to say that day neither of their bikes would start, and then the police chased us away eventually, so I never got to ride. And it's never arisen since. I've never even ridden at Lithgow or anything like that.
Well, mate, you've always got a good relationship with the fans, and there's some messages coming in. Lynette Linton says, hello, Mike, hope you're well. Julie McDonald saying, morning, everyone. And Christopher Black called you the legend. Lynette Schlein says, hello, Mike, from Australia. And Josh Pickering's watching with us as well. So, afternoon or evening as it is over there, Josh, as always.
Nice to hear these names. They're all good people.
So there's also a question from Gary Dixon coming, Mike, and he's asking, is there any plan to digitally archive your collection of Monarchs programmes?
Well, possibly. That's an interesting one. I have done a lot of scanning for our former announcer, Douglas Griffin, who likes to see these programmes and hasn't got so many himself now, but I haven't got very far with it. And I haven't really thought about making it available online, but it's quite a good idea, I think, really. It's one of the things I would like to do. And some of the things I would like to do, I've managed to do during lockdown. It does help in that sort of way. So, yeah, possibly.
One of the things as well, Mike, is obviously you video every meeting and have done for a number of years. Is there ever times that you think, I'd rather just be in the stands with your friends, watching the Speedway from that kind of angle? Because I know certainly years ago, people would say to me, would you ever fancy doing the stadium announcing at Falkirk? And I think, no, it's about going to the pub before, meeting your friends, having a few beers, and you need a few beers to watch Falkirk, and then you go and meet them after. Is there ever a point where you think, I'd rather just sit with my friends and watch the Speedway? Or is that your kind of passion? I want to be behind the camera?
No, I don't think I've ever felt that I would like to not video the meetings. I like to have the records, and that includes the video. And I can see friends before the meeting starts, and also I very much enjoy visiting the Armadale bar at the end of the meeting, and I hope when we restart that'll still be possible. That's my favourite couple of hours of the week after the meeting. The tension's passed, and I can have a beer and chat to people. I think that's great.
Do you get nervous before a meeting, Mike?
Yes, definitely, especially, well, really every meeting. I was going to say especially away matches, but I don't think it is especially away matches. I'm always nervous because I want things to go well. I want the crowd to enjoy it and go home happy, and I don't want the crowds to fall because things have gone wrong during meetings. I absolutely detest it when we have big delays due to crashes or something like that. I hate that. So I'm nervous that everything is going to go well, basically. Not so much that we have to win. I don't bother so much about that, although that helps. Just that it's been a good night every time, and I get nervous in case it's not.
Well, Mike, we've got the first controversial question of the day coming for you, and it's come from John Houston. He says he went to Peterborough in 1974 with you versus Glasgow. And who did I meet? But Mike Hunter. What are you doing here? A few of us came down on the train, he said. Going back in the meeting, he says, does Mike remember being a tiger for the night?
Well, I was more than a tiger for the night, really. In the 1970s, I used to travel a lot to watch Glasgow. That was my team then. I had a friend, Charlie Tulloch, who used to go and watch George Hunter everywhere. So when George was riding for the Tigers, I often went with him. I saw the Tigers win at Cradley Heath one time, and I may not have actually done the Highland Fling, but I certainly was with people who were doing the Highland Fling that night. So being a Tiger is not a great problem to me, although I wouldn't ever claim to be a Tiger now, of course. But when there was no Monarchs, I wanted the Tigers to do well.
Is there any track? Sorry, go on, John.
No, that's exactly the question I was going to ask. Liam, on you go.
No, go on, you go. I'll be nice.
John Baxter's asking, is there a track in the UK that you haven't visited then, Mike?
There's none at the moment. I missed Skegness. I missed one or two like Nelson and Doncaster that didn't last very long, and I never got there. Ashington. But there's none at the moment. Although I don't travel as much now. I'm a bit old and don't get around so easily, but I used to go to every meeting that Monarchs were in, and during the 70s I would happily go to 100 120 or more meetings each summer.
How big a part of the attraction was the travelling, Mike? There's a question in from Derek saying he's looking forward to the next away match and a big breakfast on the way. When do you think that will be? You know, how much of the attraction of the sport is all that travelling and actually the camaraderie that comes with that?
I have enjoyed it in my time, and I do like it when we have organised buses, especially if it's an overnight one where get a nice breakfast in the morning. Indeed, that's always part of it. But matches like Plymouth away as a one-off and things like that really seriously start to weigh you down when you get to the sort of age I am now. I would struggle to keep going to all these kind of matches now, definitely. I like travelling with fellow supporters, so that's good fun.
And I take it the killer is when you get there and it's rained off after.
Oh, well, that sometimes happens, yes. But sometimes I get a feeling of relief related to that old nervousness I was talking about. Seems mad to go all that way and feel relieved when it's not on, but I have felt like that in my time.
The couple of people have asked the same question. Jeremy Glendinning and Michael Purves have asked, who's your favourite rider from the three eras? So Old Meadowbank, Powder Hall and Armadale. Who's been your favourite from the three?
That's a tricky one. And there's loads and loads of riders that I like, and that some of them I know personally. But usually when I'm asked who my favourites are, I have four names in my head, but they don't cover all the eras. They would be Freddie Schott, Peter Carr, Les Collins and Kenny McKenna, just because they are fantastic people as well as great riders and great contributors to the Monarchs. But that doesn't bring in it. My original favourite rider was Dick Campbell, so I suppose he would be my favourite from the Meadowbank era. Although Doug Templeton and George Hunter are also in that era, and they would be high up in my list as well. The Powder Hall era, well, Les, of course, was pretty much the king of that era, but there's loads of others. Dave Trounston, who I think you've got on next week, he was a great friend and a rider who did very well for us. And then, of course, the motor when you get to Armadale, and Freddie Schott, who inspired our first league title win and did an incredible amount for the club in both his spells with March, but especially when he came back in the 2000s.
Well, Mike, you've just given away an exclusive to everybody. We do indeed have Dave Trounston next week.
Sorry.
How was your job with the MI5, Mike? How did that go? No, but on you go, Liam.
I was just thinking, going back to Meadowbank again, obviously, at Meadowbank there was the tragic death of Peter Craven, which I suppose brings back the reality of what we all watch every week and what could happen. I mean, I remember being at Powder Hall when Eric Broadbelt had his accident, and I mean, I can still play that in my mind. It was so horrific. You were at Meadowbank that night, Mike. What are your memories of that? And was that a time when you maybe realised for the first time how dangerous a sport we actually all love?
I remember reading that Jack Unstead had been killed in 1962, I think it was, and that was the point actually when I suddenly thought, this could happen anytime, and it certainly made me nervous about Speedway for a little while there. And then the Peter Craven thing, of course, was a terrible tragedy as well. You just have to ignore it, as the riders do, obviously. If you want to enjoy Speedway, you've got to take that element of risk with it, unfortunately.
I think it highlights the bravery of the guys that do it. And I think
totally.
John and I were discussing this as well. Once you get to know them, as we do in the tower and what have you, and you realise how young a lot of them are. Yeah. I mean, they really are brave when they go out there to do what they do. Yeah.
Thankfully, I mean, Air Fences has to be the biggest step forward we've made in the history of Speedway, really. It used to be even more dangerous. I think pre-war, it was even more dangerous when the bikes were big and heavy. It's always been a very dangerous sport, and it still is, but at least we've done something through the Air Fences to make it a bit safer.
And Bert was telling us at Meadowbank he remembers the crowd standing right up to the fence and leaning over to sort of shake his hand after he won a race. Were you one of them, Mike? Were you ever that close around?
No, I was always one of the posh folk in the grandstand. But I've certainly got film of people with rattles and scarves waving them over the fence in an incredibly dangerous fashion. That's how it was at Meadowbank. But of course, I suppose it was quite exciting standing up at the fence.
Yeah. Well, so we've talked about riders that you have enjoyed, or your favourite riders certainly. Is there a rider that's came to Armadale or to Powder Hall and you've thought, I really wish we'd signed that rider? Has there been your favourite rider that never signed for the Monarchs?
Ooh, that's a tough question.
It's not even mine, it's from Karen Kelly, so well done, Karen.
Yeah, I'd like to have maybe had time to think about that one, but obviously you'd like to have any of the great riders, but what we really want is riders who are going to fit into the team and the club. So not all the great riders would come into that category. I think when Jan Stechman guested for us at the end of 2001, he proved himself to be a rider that we would have loved to have on a regular basis. He was great to watch and he was friendly with everybody. That would be my criteria, that they have to fit into the team and not necessarily just be a superstar. But I find it difficult to come up with a particular name. I'll maybe pop up with something before the end of the chat.
Without naming names, Mike, then, has there been riders, I'm sure there has, that you came in and just thought to yourself, you don't fit the mould that you see as what you've just said there as an Edinburgh rider?
Yes, there's definitely, occasionally you see a rider who you feel is really there for himself and not for the team, and also people that can be troublesome that we really don't want. Although we've had one or two troublesome riders ourselves, and quite often we've managed to bring them around to our way of thinking. So it can work out, but you don't really want that hassle.
No. Sorry, yeah, so different tracks we spoke about. Is there one of the questions that's come in? Lynette Linton's asking, what's your favourite away track? And we've also had a question about a least favourite away track. So where's the away tracks that you really enjoy going and the ones that you go, nah, don't fancy it?
Well, my favourite track probably was Leicester Blackbird Road, although I didn't actually ever see the Monarchs race there. That was a superb track. I like going to Somerset when it's well prepared to see the spectacular racing there. Ones I don't like going to. There's things I like about Berwick, but the racing isn't one of them. I like the friendliness of the people at Berwick, and I like the way that they make a small club successful, but they've got too many problems with the size of the football pitch and the proximity of the fence. Maybe that'll be sorted this year with the widening of the track. I hope so.
Mike, towards the end of the Powder Hall years, obviously the team was under threat, and you led the campaign to save the Monarchs. You know, you now have the name Mr. Edinburgh Speedway, as far as a lot of people are concerned. For those who weren't around in those days, can you talk us through and give us a bit of the story of what happened and how you got involved in the fundraising and keeping the team together?
I presume you're talking about the Fighting Fund of 1991, yes. Well, we just got ourselves into a mess in 1990. We didn't have a team sponsor, and at one point we decided we would sign either Carl Blackbird or Freddie Shott, but our enthusiasm got the better of us and we signed them both. But it wasn't a successful year, even though Freddie did very well. The team overall wasn't successful. The crowds, I think, were falling. And at the end of that year, the directors said, we can't afford to do this anymore. So that's when we set up our first fighting fund and had a meeting at Powder Hall one night. And to my amazement, I think we were looking to raise something in the region of £10,000, and we finished up raising £30,000. That was my first real glimpse of how people are willing to rally around and support the Monarchs. And although we haven't specifically set out to have a fighting fund anytime since, nevertheless, the opportunity has arisen for people to support the club, and I do believe Monarchs fans are just about the best in the sport for supporting their club, and it's incredible how much they do for the club.
And that
fighting, necessary.
That fighting fund, Mike, did that secure the future of the club? And how did you do it? Was that purely donations, or were there events and what have you?
No, it was primarily donations. I remember saying on the night that this is not about organising events. We'll do that in the future, but primarily tonight is donations. That's what I said. And a chap called Roy Baines, who you might remember as a goalkeeper, he was a Speedway fan, and he joined me in that. He was the one who was there to help us get publicity because he was such a well-known name. And that particular night, although there wasn't a huge turnout at the stadium, I thought, when I saw how many people had come, I thought this is not going to be successful. But it turned out that it was, because everybody was very generous.
And we've got to remember, 30,000 is a lot of money now, but it was a hell of a lot more back then.
Yeah, that's right. But we've had to. There's an increasing gap in all of Speedway between what the riders get paid and what comes in through the turnstile. So we have an ongoing requirement to fill that gap, and it's not easy. But in Edinburgh, the efforts that people make are quite incredible.
Yeah, you make a good point there, Mike, about how the club has to kind of run in terms of the money through the fans and how we move forward and making that sustainable, certainly. Do you think things like the streaming that we're doing, so when Liam and I are in the tower and we're doing, do you think that's the kind of future for the sport?
I'm hopeful, is that the word? Or I certainly hope that live streaming will be a step forward and a way of bringing in more income that wasn't available to us before. I think we're invariably in the forefront of these things, and I hope we will be again, and I hope that we can get it up to the quality required to make people buy it. And of course the racing has to be good as well. People aren't going to pay to watch 15 processions, so everything needs to be right. But yes, I do believe this is something that we've come across. And I first thought of it, Liam, when we were talking on the Bridge Walk a few years ago. You were talking about streaming some of your drama performances, weren't you? And I thought then, this could be a big plus for Speedway. Hope it will be.
Yeah. John Baxter asks, Mike, I met up with you and the Monarchs fans on a tour of Polish tracks. What other countries have you visited following Speedway?
Not all that many, really. I have been to Poland. I used to go to the World Final every year, so I was in Sweden a few times for that, and Denmark and Poland. But I'm not a huge traveller overseas. I've always wanted to watch the Monarchs racing overseas, and at one time I was thinking of sponsoring a tour to Sweden, but unfortunately it turned out my money was needed in other ways to help the club, so I've never been able to afford that. But I'd love to go and watch the Monarchs race, maybe 3 or 4 matches in Sweden.
Peter Colvin asks, Mike, how is the second volume of the history of Edinburgh Speedway progressing?
Jim Henry would be wanting to ask that question too. We've got all the raw material in place. It's taken a long time since the first one, and it's still something that we plan to do, yes. It'll be 48 to 54, the second volume, and let's hope it'll be soon. It does depend on me to some extent, because Jim and Ian are more than ready to put everything in place, but we'll get on with it soon, tell them that.
Okay, and Callum Slight posted a picture of you on a bike. Not a Speedway bike, but a cycle Speedway bike, at the start line, ready to go, and he asks, how did you feel lining up for a cycle Speedway race?
Terrible, absolutely terrible. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. That was Freddie Schott's testimonial cycle Speedway event. I was up against Dennis Wallace was on gate 1, a chap called Colin was in gate 2, I was in gate 3, and Alec Harkis was in gate 4. And Dennis won the race, and apparently I knocked Alec Harkis off. He was trying to pass me and I hit my back wheel and fell off. I didn't even know until after the race when I saw photographs of Alec lying in the dust. But I felt good when it was finished, put it that way.
Would you do it again?
I might do a demonstration. I'm not keen to be in a race again. I'm probably even less fit now than I was then.
I've got a good question here from Christopher Black. We've got a good record over the last 20 years or so of developing riders, so the Thomas Jonasons, Frick, Schlein, Cookie, etc. And had that rejuvenating the careers of the likes of Ryan Fisher. What is it within our club that makes this happen, do you think?
Well, I think it might be connected to what I said earlier, that we like to have the right kind of personalities at the club and people who are going to fit in and care about the club and want to get on with their teammates. Many riders are like that, but we work hard at that, trying to make everybody feel welcome. It doesn't work 100% of the time, but I think we do have a very good record indeed. There's no doubt about that, and they don't have to be easy, compliant characters either. I don't know if Craig Cook was mentioned in your opening there, but Craig was a bit of a loose cannon at times in his early days and did some things that we'd rather he didn't do, but eventually we got on fantastically well with Craig and he gave us an unforgettable 5 years with his standard of performances. I think he would recognise that whilst he helped us, we also helped him as well. So I think that's it really. Rory would probably agree that we tried to make him part of the club, and that's what we tried to do with all the riders.
You said a couple of weeks ago he felt it was like a family for him, and I don't think Edinburgh will be unique in that. I think you'll find Speedway clubs up and down the land they'll always have, and that will do that. We'll be there to make people feel welcome. But I certainly think at Edinburgh it's one of the things I've seen. The riders come in, there's always people there to try and make them feel part of the kind of Edinburgh family, if you like. Yeah. What's been your, you've seen a lot obviously since you went to Edinburgh in 1961. I know, but my favourite moment, and we've showed it on the MTV Rewind that night in 2014. What would you say from all those years was your favourite moment? Was it maybe the 2003 title win?
Well, in 2003 we won because another team lost, so that isn't such a great moment necessarily, although we certainly enjoyed celebrating afterwards. The 2014 one is probably unbeatable for a night of drama. One I always remember, which wasn't actually winning a trophy but was getting to the final, was the 1997 Cup semi-final at Reading, when Reading I thought they were guilty of sharp practices that night, but we went into the last race. I can't remember if we needed 3 or 4 points to win in the last race, but Peter Carr and Kenny McKenna got a 5-1 over Dave Mullett in that last race, and I can remember the excitement of that was absolutely tremendous. And of course we went on to win the Cup in the final. That was 97. That was a great time. But there's many, and it's not all about winning things either. It's just about having great meetings is the main thing.
On the flip side of that, Mike, is there any least favourite moments then that you've really not enjoyed as an Edinburgh fan?
Oh well, any night where the meeting takes an eternity because of crashes and things like that. The night of Neil Hewitt's injury, for example, was terrible for Neil primarily. But other nights where the injuries haven't been as bad as that, but which go on and on and on. And it rains and we try and carry on with the meeting and we take ages to decide whether the meeting should continue and people are slithering about all over the place. These kind of nights are awful. But that's not naming anyone specifically, but you know the kind of night that I mean, I think.
A few more greetings coming in. Mike, Barney, Kennett. Hi, Mike. Great to see you. And Dunlop, great listening to Mike. What an ambassador for the Monarchs and what a legend. And Steve Gilroy, what are your memories of being Scotland's #1 sports fan?
Well, yes. you maybe don't know what that refers to, but Stevie very kindly proposed me to be a contestant in a competition that was run by STV and The Sun, these two august bodies, to find Scotland's #1 sports fan. He put me forward because I'd missed so few meetings for so many years. And when a Speedway person gets nominated for something and it's done by public vote, you can virtually guarantee that the Speedway person will win because Speedway fans rally round. And that's what happened. So I was offered a trip to the Ryder Cup, but I turned that one down because it might have clashed with a Monarchs match. FTV thought that was tremendously funny and had a bit of a programme about it. Then they offered me to go and see England versus West Indies test match in Antigua, so that was the one that I chose. I went to a new ground called the Viv Richards Stadium, and the test match was abandoned after 10 balls because there was too much sand in the surface. So that was not a successful sports event at all, but it was a wonderful holiday. And in fact, they did stage a test match at another ground nearby, which I was able to see a day of as well. I really loved that trip. That was really something, and it was thanks to Stevie, really, that that happened.
There's a message here from Gay Johnson who says, "Hi Mike, you're looking great, so good to hear your voice."
Is that Gay?
Gay, yeah. And of course, many people have heard that voice for years doing the commentary on the videos. And John and I were just talking about this the other week when we were watching one of the early matches. And you certainly, I would say, got away with a lot more then than you get away with now.
Well, you don't miss them and hit the wall, Mike, do you?
That's certainly sometimes true. Somebody asked me the other day if I'd mellowed over the years, and I definitely have. When I hear myself now and compare it to some of the harsh things I used to say, it's just because I want them to do well, I suppose. But if somebody I feel hasn't done as well as they should be doing, yeah, I can be quite ferocious at times. There's a wee one with Scott Lamb I'll maybe recount. Scott's the only person that's ever complained about my commentary, I think. And he was quite right. There was a match against Eastbourne. Scott made a mess of one of the corners, and I said, Scott's made a dog's breakfast of that corner. And then in the next race, Martin Duggar did exactly the same thing. And I said, oh, there must be something wrong with the track. So Scott said, how come when I do it, it's a dog's breakfast, and when he does it, there's something wrong with the track? That was a very valid complaint by Scott there.
I love the indignant line that you used, Mike. Oh, he's fallen off.
Yeah, well.
Sometimes followed by what an idiot.
There was a Mick Powell one where when Mick crashed, I said, what is the boy doing? And he remembered that. And the following year, when the supporters club put on a picnic, and I went away for a pee up the hill, when I was coming back down, I fell over. And Mick Powell shouted, what is the boy doing?
Well, we'll turn the attentions to what would it hopefully it can still be this year's Monarchs. Josh Pickering has messaged in saying, hey boys, I hope you are well. With a bit of luck, I'll see you soon. Absolutely, Josh, it's great to see you. Or great to hear from you, rather, and we hope we'll see you soon. What's your thoughts on it all, Mike? And also, what's your thoughts on what I think would have been a very entertaining 2020 squad?
Well, it's to an extent it's experimental, but most of our years have been good because experiments have come off. Obviously, the heat leaders, Sam and Richie and Josh, there's no question marks there at all. Sam and Richie will blitz the opposition in the first corner and win that way, and Josh will blitz the opposition on the last corner and win that way. And then at reserve, I believe William is going to have a better season. I think his attitude and the team that's working with him will be good. And I think James Sargent at reserve is obviously very good as well. The ones we don't know so much about, Lassie Fredrickson and Kai Thompson. Kai, I've heard a lot of good things about. And Lassie, we've followed his progress for quite a while. He should maybe have come over a year or two earlier to really develop his career. with them, you can only hope and try and help them to do well, because there's no guarantees there. They're completely inexperienced in British Speedway, but it's a team I've been looking forward to watching, and either later this year or hopefully early next year, it'll be a team we will watch. I don't care if we win things necessarily. I know some people that's important. For me, it's only about enjoying it, good racing, and not being bottom of the league anyway.
One thing that you've not had to worry about this year, Mike, you mentioned it earlier, they gave you the programme to do back in the 70s, and you're still doing it. You'll have had a wee bit of time this year without having to do it. But what did you ever think you'd still be producing the programme all these years later? And what are the secrets of keeping it fresh? What do you look for? What makes the perfect programme for the fan to pick up?
Well, I actually think the current programme could do with improving, because I used to do a lot of interviews with former monarchs or opposition riders, and although it's quite difficult to get one of those every week, I thought that was a good feature. I think it's become a wee bit too word heavy, I feel like. The pages are packed with words, and you have to be quite keen to read all that. So whilst the programme is very well designed now, the content I would like to change a wee bit. But I think you asked if I thought I'd be doing it this long. No, definitely not. And there's been certainly times when I would really have liked to pass it over and get other people to do a wee bit more. We already do get contributions from John and people like that, Jeff Graythorne. But I have enjoyed not doing it this summer. If somebody else who I thought could do a good job came along, I'd be very pleased. But I haven't had many volunteers, to be honest.
You'll get your applications in to Mike.Hunter.
Yeah, please.
But you've watched the sport a number of years. There's obviously been some big changes. You mentioned air fences, and I totally agree with you. For me, the best thing that's come into the sport, especially when you see some of the things at GP level, how hard these guys are going. And I'll always remember Jason Crump. I think it was Crump. I want to see Golob, and Crump just almost arrowed into the fence, got up, walked away. It never happened with a wooden fence. What other things have you seen? What a couple of good and a couple of bad things that you've seen over the years? You've said they've been a great improvement to the sport, and I wish they'd never done that because it's taken something away from it.
Well, I think the worst thing, to my mind, and it's kind of been inevitable, ever since the sport started, riders have tried to get bikes to go faster and to make them easier to ride. And I think we've now gone too far, which has led to more processional racing because everybody can go flat out. And so in other words, obviously, whoever makes the gate is likely to win. That's always been, to some extent, the criticism of Speedway, but now it's, I believe, worse because of the sheer speed of the bikes and the fact that everybody can pretty much go flat out. I don't like the fact that riders ride for so many teams, but I understand why that's happened. I preferred the days when each team had its own 7 riders and you knew your team had a real identity. As for good things, well, just the continuation of the fact that the riders are tremendously brave and tremendously skillful. That's never changed. I think they're crazy, but I'm delighted that they are, and they entertain us so much. And I'm happy that Josh Pickering has never learnt to gate, because although to be fair, that's not the whole truth with Josh. I would like to see him get greater recognition for the ability that he has, and probably the only way that's going to happen is if he does gate a bit better and get his scores up a wee bit, because not all tracks are suited to passing. But great racing has been always the great thing. A race where 2 or 3 riders race close together for 4 laps, you can't beat it.
Mark Lucas has the killer question, Mike, the one that you were dreading. What can be done to save and improve British Speedway? He remembers the thrills of the 95 season at Powder Hall when it was one big league. And tying in with that, Wayne Pattison asks, what do you think Speedway needs to do now to stop tracks closing down?
Well, that is the killer question, really, because I don't think anybody's really got an answer to these things. The seeds of Speedway's decline go back a long way, because in the boom years, we should have invested in owning stadiums. That's where we've really gone badly wrong. Clubs can be thrown out at a moment's notice. What can we do about it? Nothing, probably. I think most of Speedway's problems are not of their own making and are possibly insurmountable. Over the years, many things have happened in Speedway that we just couldn't do anything about. If you go right back to the boom years, they came to an end because of the advent of television, because of an appalling tax called the entertainment tax in the 1950s, where Speedway had to pay 60% of its takings before they got any of the money. And nowadays, there are just so many other attractions. And Speedway is not the kind of sport that gains support from governments or local authorities. It's noisy, obviously. That's all the problems.
Do you think, Mike, that
I haven't come up with any answers there, but I don't really have any answers. I wish I had. I used to think I had lots of answers, but not now.
Sorry, Mike, do you think there was a feeling when Sky came along and things like that? You know, Rory had spoken a couple of weeks ago about darts and his opinion on darts and how they've managed to make that now. The Premier League of darts is huge and things. We'd never really got on that train as a sport. Why was that? Do you think it's because of the replays and things that they had?
Darts is easy to televise, of course, because you only need to cover the board and the dart thrower. Mm-hmm. Speedway is harder to televise. You've also got the weather problems that the TV companies do not like. They don't want meetings rained off because it still costs them a fortune. I think in many ways we've been unlucky in a lot of ways. Everything about Speedway doesn't work as far as TV is concerned. Of course, Polish Speedway is shown on TV all the time, so it's not impossible. But in Britain, there's too many other attractions, I think. We're so besotted with football, or at least the TV companies think we are, that again, I don't have any answers, I'm afraid, if you're expecting me to wave a wand and solve everything.
We're here to save the sport, Mike. What's happened?
on a more positive note then, Mike, when you look back at all the Monarchs teams that you've watched over the years, is there one season, is there one team that always springs to mind that was the most exciting to watch?
Well, the 2003 team was a phenomenal mixture of youth and experience, with Carr and Schott, along with the likes of Rory and Magnus Carlsen and Theo Piper. You can't beat that for a combination, I don't think. But also, you'd have to say the 2008 team was quite similar. And the 2014 team was just... The riders I know that were in that team still talk about it today as the best year they ever had, because it was just such a side. And it had Derek Snedden. There's an example of a rider who wasn't a top star, but whose contribution was absolutely crucial.
And how important, just that's interesting, Mike, because obviously there have been riders over the years who might not have been the team's top scorers, but their contribution in the pits, their contribution as captain, their contribution, with G and up the rest of the team have probably been every bit as important.
Yeah, well, I think Derek's the number one example of that. Although you'd have to, Freddie Schott was the top scorer, but he was also doing the same job as Derek as well. I saw Freddie on many away tracks at the pit's gate, encouraging everybody, and he had decided at the start of the season that we were going to win the league. And he told Alan Bridget that, and he did it. That was amazing. But you also need things to go your way. Each of these years that I've mentioned, I think we managed to largely avoid injuries, or if we had injuries, then we were able to replace the riders concerned. You need a lot of luck. But these teams were absolutely memorable.
How was the feeling, Mike? Obviously, you'd followed them for the 61. It gets to 2003. I've watched Falkirk lose 3 Scottish Cup finals. It breaks my heart every time. I'd love to watch them win the Scottish Cup. How was it for you that 2003 comes, you finally win the league? Was it the kind of, was that just the feeling that it was all done, we've finally done it, and we can go and do it again and again and again?
Well, to be honest, I never gave it a moment's thought before 2003. I don't think we were ever that close to winning the league previously. We had some good sides, 51 and 81. Not that I was there in 51. But I never thought about it, really. I just enjoyed my Speedway. But when 2003 came along and we started doing really well, then obviously start to think about it then. And the fact that we've done it in total 5 times now in a period of only about a dozen years is quite amazing. It owes a lot to shrewd signings, I think. Having Freddie and then Ryan Fisher and then Craig Cook as number ones. Fisher and Cook in particular were riders that had been discarded by their previous clubs. I enjoyed the fact that we were able to prove that these riders were really something and not failures as they had appeared to be previously. Sam Masters as well was discarded by his previous team, and he's been superb for us. And I love the fact, I'm probably wandering way off the question here, but I love the fact that Craig and Sam got 5 wins 2 years running to win the league. I don't think that'll ever be equalled. And by the way, I've seen Falkirk win the cup because it was on telly in the late 50s when they won it.
Oh, mate, honestly, 3 times breaks my heart. Do you think on that, you mentioned Freddie, you mentioned Ryan, Craig, do you think a team, and I'm not talking about Edinburgh here, I'm just as a whole, can win the league without having that number one?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that's...
It
Or
is
is that hugely important to have that?
I think it's harder, but I think it can happen. People might remember the pool team of 1969 that had no real big stars in it. And more recently, maybe Hull in 2004. Magnus Carlsen, we had to leave him out of our team, and he went to Hull and won the league again. And that was in a team, okay, they had Paul Thorpe and Gary Stead, but they weren't 10-point riders, I don't think. They won it through solidity. So it can be won lots of ways. It just so happens that our league-winning teams have had these dominant number ones, but it can be done other ways. And you need good riders at the bottom end as well, no doubt about that.
John Houston asks, Mike, will your memories group be back after the virus goes?
Yes, as soon as we can, definitely. We knocked that on the head before the lockdown started because we recognised we were all old doddery people that perhaps didn't want to be getting any viruses. But yeah, we'll certainly start that. John, you probably know, runs memories group through in Coatbridge and does a lot on that side of things. But yeah, we'll be doing that, and anybody's welcome to come. You don't actually have to be an old doddery person, but of course, if it helps to be a non-worker, to be a retired person.
And of course, people can keep up with the memories on your Old Meadowbank Speedway Facebook page.
Yes, indeed they can.
Yeah. Andrew Pennycook asks, on a more personal kind of note, is there any other motorsports you enjoy watching other than Speedway? And do you like watching other oval sports?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm not a motorsports fan in particular, apart from Speedway. Obviously, I've followed them over the years. I'm a sports fan, but my other main sports would be football and cricket, I think, really. Hearts season ticket holder, Newcastle United season ticket holder, although I hardly ever go. And I've always liked watching cricket since I was young. Gary Sobers and people like that, fantastic. But not other motorsports, really.
What's behind the Newcastle United season ticket, Mike?
Because when they went into the championship, I thought they're bound to get promoted. So if I get a season ticket now, when there's not such great demand, I'll be able to see Man United and Arsenal and all. And also, it's only a couple of 100 yards from the station, so it's easy to get to. So it had all. It's not because I was particularly a Newcastle fan, although I do like Newcastle people. It just seemed convenient. Unfortunately, what I discovered when we arrived in the top league was that Man United and Arsenal tend to play there on Tuesday nights or Sunday mornings or all sorts of mad times for television, so I haven't seen very many of these teams. I've seen Huddersfield.
Johnny Besko, Mike asks, Polish fans are so passionate about their Speedway. How can we capture that spirit and instill it in the British fans?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Poland has some advantages. The local authorities and the governments and big business put money into building tremendous stadiums. I think that might be the starting point. Also, the country is not as besotted with football as we are. That gives Speedway a chance. I think it's very difficult for Speedway to get a chance here because it's so poorly publicised. The national press isn't interested. The TV isn't much interested. The main channels anyway. So again, I don't have the answer to how we can make it happen, but I wish it would, because you do see them enjoying themselves over there, definitely.
You mentioned the World Finals earlier as well, going to them every year. How do you feel the differences between that one-off final and the Grand Prix nowadays? Obviously, we get to see more of these guys and the 10, 11, 12 meetings that they have, but I think you probably couldn't have beat that one-off night to see who the world's best was.
Yeah. You can't beat the one-off final, there's no doubt about that. Going to a world final and knowing that night you were going to see who the new world champion was, that was a tremendous feeling. Even when the meetings weren't particularly good sometimes, that didn't matter. It was still such an occasion. And if the meeting happened to be good as well, it was absolutely marvellous. I do enjoy the Grand Prix and I understand why they've gone to that system, but I definitely preferred the one-off world finals. The last one in 1994 was probably the best world final I ever saw. That really was good at Voyans.
Yeah. Who's been the rider then that you think hasn't made it to a world champion that you said should have done? And I'm going back way back as well as the riders you've said, on that one-off final, they've just missed it or they've had that problem or whatever that you said he should have been a world champion.
Of course, so one thing I think is that people don't realise how few people have become world champions. Everybody talks about somebody being a future world champion, but that's a very, very difficult thing to do. And for riders like Major and Funden and Crump and Pedersen to win it so often is an incredible achievement. People like Kota Norden, perhaps, or I don't know. Ryder Ride might have got to that stage. I don't know. Perhaps he was too interested in the financial side of it rather than doing the best he could. But I can't think of one particular rider who I felt ought to have won it. Those that have won it are the ones that probably should have won it. And my admiration for them is enormous. All sports, there's a minuscule difference between the riders at the top of the sports. The reason that Stephen Hendry won so many snooker titles was that he had the best nerve. And I think that goes for Speedway as well. The one who can come up with the best form when the chips are down, such as Ivan Major, they're the ones that win. And it's the same in all sports. It's the same kind of attitude that wins it.
Yeah. Right. Well,
sorry, Gay Johnson's come back to you, Mike, saying Martin says hi, and it must be time to travel to Australia when COVID is over, of course.
I'd love to go to Australia. I've always wanted to go to Australia, and yet for some reason I always seem to be doing something that stops me doing it. But Gay and Martin stayed with me in 1984 or something, and we had a great time. And Martin should have been a good speedway rider, but I don't think he'd ever quite made up his mind that he really wanted to be one. But Martin Johnson, that is. I would love to come out and see them, and to see Nigel Alderton and Brett Saunders and Mick Powell and all these people would be marvellous. And I'll really try and do it. Roger Lambert, of course, as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, listen, Mike, we're at the end of our hour now. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Is there anyone that over the years that you would like to make special mention to, who has helped you, who has supported you, or you've just enjoyed watching or anything like that through your years as a Monarchs fan?
Well, all these guys that I've spoken to about, Freddie was a fantastic friend. He stayed with me for a year as well, and that's a hard question again. Everybody that's joined in supporting the Grand Draw, the Monarchs 100, the Fans Trust, I'm glad we do it all, and I'm glad it's so successful, and I hope we can keep it all going for many years. And you guys as well, you've taken over as the presentation team, do a great job and wear the right t-shirts and all that sort of thing. It's
sometimes I forgot my shirt.
I think the thing I like most about Edinburgh is that we all pull in the one direction almost all of the time. Obviously there can be some disagreements, but basically everybody wants the same thing, and that's why it works well.
Mike, just a very quick message from Joshy Pickering. He says, one thing, Mike, I heard John and Liam say they would pay for your ticket to Australia if we win the league this year.
Right.
He's got bloody good hearing,
very
John.
Kind of you, thank you.
And
well, Josh, it's up to you then, pal.
Sorry, Barney Kennett says hello and that he spoke to Brett this morning.
Oh, good. That's great. Aye. Well, it'd be nice to think we could maybe get Brett onto one of these things eventually, but I know he wasn't tremendously hot on the technology when we had him do something for our anniversary a couple of years ago. But it's great to hear from Barney Kennett as well. What a guy he was. He
said, great show, Mike. That's what he says.
Thank you very much.
Well, Mike, I get the impression we've probably only just scratched the surface of your involvement in Edinburgh Speedway, but it's been absolutely brilliant talking to you today.
Thank you. Hope it was okay.
Yeah. So we're back on Tuesday. We've got the extra show on Tuesday for EMTV Rewind, brought to us, of course, courtesy from all of Mike's videos as well. And we'll be back on Friday with another EMTV Rewind as well. And we're back next Sunday as well with Dave Townsend. So join us for all three of those if you can, and keep your Speedway fix going through the summer. Mike, it's been an absolute joy to talk to you as always. And thanks for joining us. Like Liam says, sorry, we've barely scratched the surface of your knowledge.
Thank you.
What a memory he's got as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll be back next Sunday.